This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. Zev Brenner, he's become a regular guest on our program. We met him a year ago for Pesach, and he's a prolific writer. Rabbi Glatstein joined us, the Rav of Kikilis, the Ferris Mordechai. He has a whole group of Sefer. The latest one is just out in time for Shemos, Exodus, and is published by Aleze's publishers in Liquid, but he's written in Bereshis, and we had him on for Hanukkah, and I know Purim is in the works. So, Rabbi Glatstein, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Thank you. So last time I had you on, you're dealing with Bereshis, and you published Bereshis, Maggid Harakiah, but I believe you only did half Bereshis, and you skipped half and moved to Shemos, right?
Yeah, because the end of Bereshis is so loaded, I wanted to treat it separately. With the sale of Yosef, it's so latent, it's so loaded with interesting subjects that have to be tapped into. So I'm still working on the end of Bereshis, and this came out on Sefer Shemos, Baruch Hashem, right in time for the new Sefer.
So it's a new beginning. We're starting a whole new book and a lot to think about. So I'm always intrigued because I think you're right about the fact that how many names did Moshe have? Did he have 7, 10? You added more. So let's look at the fact that he has so many names, and why does the Torah only call him by one, and how did he end up with so many different names?
Yeah, well, there's an idea that a name is not just a conventional appellation, but a name is supposed to capture the essence of that entity. In fact,
parents have nevuah, they have prophecy when they name the child.
Right. Right. And when the angels asked God about man, Hashem said his wisdom is greater than your wisdom, and the Malachim said, how so? That they passed this animal in front of Adam, and Adam said, that's a gamal, that's a par, that's a seh. So the camel, a sheep. He was able to capture the entire essence of an animal in one word. That's the great wisdom of giving a name. So the fact that Moshe, according to the Gemara, had 7 names, or according to the Medrash, had 10 names, that's just a way of describing the breadth and the greatness of Moshe's spiritual capacity, that he needed so many names because his greatness was so vast. And it's interesting, of all the names that God chooses to refer to Moshe, he uses the name that the Basya gave him.
Basya Bitya, I heard people different.
Yeah, actually you're right. In Divrei Hayamim, the correct pronunciation is Bisya, but conventionally, somehow Basya, daughter of God, became the pronunciation. But Bisya is more precise. Moshe is not even a Hebrew word. Moshe is an Egyptian name, and the fact that God should refer to Moshe by an Egyptian name, it's like calling someone, I don't know, Jeff or Kevin, is definitely worthy of our attention. Why, of all his names? He had very nice names. Tuvia, the good one of God. Avigdar, the father of all those who made fences around the Torah. Why, of all the names that Moshe Rabbeinu had, are we using the name he was yanked out of the water? So in the Sefer we discuss a number of approaches. One very beautiful approach, and maybe we'll speak about the other one as well, is, if we were to try to identify the secret of the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu, where, how did he rise up to reach such a high level? After all, the Torah says he was the most humble man who ever lived. Rabbeinu Yonah says that just like he was the most humble man who ever lived, he likewise excelled in every imaginable character trait. So how did he do it? So this week, we find Moshe Rabbeinu's first encounter with God, where he came to the burning bush, and Moshe Rabbeinu stops for a minute, and he says, "Let me asura nave era. I'm going to turn aside and see es hamara hagada azeh, this great vision. Madua lo yivar hasna. Why does the bush not burn?" Now, this wasn't just a physical phenomenon. He was experiencing some kind of prophecy, where he envisioned a bush that was enveloped in fire and was not being consumed, and he put in the effort to try to comprehend the meaning of this prophecy. Sfarno, one of the classic Rishonim, explains that when God saw that Moshe Rabbeinu made an attempt to understand the prophecy, Hashem said, well, you're making an effort, I will assist you in understanding. Sfarno invokes the expression, Haba letaher Messiah oisai. Someone who comes to purify themselves, God assists them. So Moshe Rabbeinu made a small effort, and God said, you're making a small effort, now I will give you the heavenly assistance to really comprehend this prophecy. And the Sfarno says, this is similar to the psukim in Parshas Yisro, where Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Har Sinai, where the verse says, Vayal Moshe al Har Sinai, Moshe went up, and when Moshe Rabbeinu went up, God came down on the mountain and he gave him the Torah. So there the Sfarno also says, when God saw the preparation that Moshe Rabbeinu made to ready himself to receive this divine communication at Sinai, so Hashem said, okay, you're making the effort, I'll give you the divine prophecy. So we see that had Moshe Rabbeinu not prepared himself and not made that small hachana, that small preparation to ready himself at Sinai, God would not have given him the Torah. So 2 times in the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, he made what we call hachana ketana, a small preparation, and God endorsed his efforts, acknowledged his efforts, and said, okay, you did your part, now I will give you the heavenly assistance, both by the burning bush and at Sinai. So it seems like the secret of the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu was that he understood, you're not going to climb the heavens on your own, and you're not going to do it instantaneously, but you have to sort of do your small part. And when you do your small part, then the divine assistance kicks in. We see that by the burning bush. Moshe Rabbeinu made the efforts to understand, and Hashem explained it, and by Sinai. So where did Moshe get this sort of understanding from, that in spirituality, you do your small part, and then God will take you the rest of the way there. You know, the story goes that when the elevator was invented, the Chafetz Chaim was very excited about the elevator because he felt the elevator is a perfect analogy to ruchnius, to spirituality, where all you got to do is press the button, step in, and then the elevator takes you the rest of the way there. So, how did Moshe Rabbeinu know this? Where did he get this from? That you do your part and then God kicks in. He got it from his stepmother, Bisya or Basya, because when he was floating in the river, she from a distance sees the floating baby, and it says, Vayishlach es amasa, she sent literally her maidservant, but Rashi brings from Chazal, she sent her arm. Her arm was only an amma long, but Moshe was well off in the distance, and a miracle occurred that the arm extended many, many, many amos. And so from Moshe's very inception, from his very beginning, from his genesis, it was imbued in him, it was endowed in him, this concept, this teaching, that you do your small part, and once you do your part, the heavenly assistance comes in. So of all the names that Moshe Rabbeinu had, God selected the name Ki min hamayim meshisihu, Moshe, that he was drawn from the water, because that endowed him, that imbued him with this very important principle that, somebody says, I'll never learn the whole Shas, I'll never learn the whole corpus of Talmud Bavli, it's too big. So he said, no, don't look at it that way. You just make an effort, try to learn one page. You do your part, you try to learn one page, God will take it from there. But you got to you have to take the first step. And that was really the secret of Moshe Rabbeinu, where he always said, I'm going to do my part, and then the heavenly assistance came in. So that's one facet of the name of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Very beautiful thought. But you mentioned that Moshe's greatness, he became a gadol. I saw another thought, which I don't know if you have in your Sefer, but it's a beautiful thought, is that who is a gadol? Who is considered a great person? Well, you can say somebody who's a titan in business, somebody who knows how to learn a lot. But the Torah gives us the hint. This is Vayikol Moshe. Moshe became a gadol. Why? He saw the siblos. We got involved in the oppression of our people. He did something about it.
Yeah.
So how do we know that this is really the essence? So they say, I think it's the Shlach Kodesh says that if you want to know what the word means, you got to go back to the first time it's used in the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first time that the word gadol is used? Dealing with the luminaries, with the sun and the moon, where it says the sun is the great sun that shines at day and the moon shines by night.
Mm-hmm.
Very night, the moon shines at night. What does it mean? But if you look scientifically, you see the moon reflects the sun. The sun is the giver, the moon is the receiver. So that's what we say, is that when it comes to Moshe, Moshe gave. In other words, he gave of himself a sivlos. And that's what we say at a bris milah. We say hakatan gadol yeh. This is the child, and he should become big. What does it really mean? Right now, he's a cut. He's a taker. He's a receiver. Mm-hmm. He should become a gadol. He should be a giver. And that's why Moshe was the giver. So I thought it fits in with what you're saying. Moshe was great in many different levels, but I thought this was a nice way of looking at it as well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful idea. And actually, we'll get to it if you allow me back Pesach time. You know why it's called Shabbos Hagadol. But there we find many times throughout the Chumash, whenever you see the word Gadol, Gadol means the ability to give. Even in Va'es Chanan, Moshe Rabbeinu prays, Ata hachiloisa laharos es avdecha. God, you've begin to show your servant as gadlecha, your greatness. Rashi on the spot says, Midas tuvcha, your attribute of giving, your attribute of goodness. That is gadol. In fact, somebody showed me a beautiful parable. You know, you have these two great bodies of water in Israel. You have the Kinneret, you have the Galilee, and you have a little bit down, further south, you have the Dead Sea. And these two bodies of water cannot be more disparate. The Galilee is teeming with fish, with plant life. You have fish in the Galilee that don't exist anywhere else in the world. The Talmud talks about the fruits that grow in that region as the most luscious fruits in the world. Peros genosar. And then a little bit south, you have the Dead Sea. It's dead like a doorknob. Their scientists debate whether an amoeba or a bacteria could even exist in the Dead Sea. So how do you have these two bodies of water? One flows into the other. One is full of life, and the other is dead. So the idea is the Galilee, it receives the water from a higher water source, but it then gives it sends it down. It's a giver. Where there's giving, there's life, there's vitality, there is growth. But the Dead Sea is only a taker, because after the water collects there, that's where it ends. And where there's just taking, then there's no life, and that's the Dead Sea. So that's like a very vivid, graphic example of, when there's giving, there's life, there's vitality. When there's only taking, nothing could survive.
Beautiful. I love that thought. We're having a give and take conversation. Our guest is Rabbi Daniel Glatstein, the Rabbi Kehillas Feres Mordechai. His latest Sefer is called Maggid Harakiah. It's a beautiful Sefer. It's a beautiful book about Shemos, about Exodus. Some wonderful thoughts is what we've been discussing. Rabbi Glatstein, you mentioned names, and we're talking about names. Shifra and Pua. There's obviously a lot of discussion who Shifra and Pua, the midwives that refused to accede to Paro's orders to kill the Jewish babies. So let's analyze who they are.
Yeah. So, right, as you mentioned, the Talmud tells us in Maseches Sota on page 11 on Daf Yud Aleph, Shifra was Yocheved and Pua was Miriam. Shifra, because she was Mishaperes es Havlad, she would beautify the child, she would shape it, she would form it, she would make sure the limbs came out in the proper way. And Pua, she would always coo the child. Actually, they tell a humorous Hasidic story about Rav Hillel of Kalamaya, who was from the students of the Chassam Sofer, but a big kanoi. He was a big zealot. And when he would go to different communities and he would reprimand them and give them musar and tell them, what they were doing wrong. And people once came to him and said, Rabbi, I don't understand. The Divrei Chaim was here also. And when Divrei Chaim came here, he said, we're wonderful, we're tzaddikim, how righteous we are. And you come here and we can't do anything right. So he said, well, there are two midwives in the Jewish people. There's Shifra and Puah. Shifra, she makes everything beautiful. That's her style, is everything is good. Puah is, she said, poo, poo, poo. So there are two different kinds of rabbis. Some rabbis, everything is good, and some rabbis, they tell it as it is. But interesting, the Gemara actually in Masechta Sota says two explanations for Shifra. One is she beautified the child, and the other one is that the Jewish people, Shapara v'rava biyameha, in her lifetime, the Jewish people procreated. So actually, Zev, I just came back from Morocco. I did a Jewish heritage tour in Morocco. We went to the grave of the kever of somebody, Yehuda ben Attar. Yehuda ben Attar was the preeminent Talmud Chacham in Morocco. We're talking in the 17th century. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Reb Chaim ibn Attar, went to him to get an approbation, to get a haskama for his Sefer. He was, Rabbi Yehuda ibn ben Attar frequently learned with Eliyahu HaNavi. So I'm on your show a lot. He would speak to Eliyahu HaNavi a lot. That was his go-to, and
that's Elijah the prophet.
Elijah the prophet. And in fact, the Chida writes that it was well known. People who would go to his grave would experience all kinds of salvation and miracle. And anyway, he sort of analyzes this Gemara, that what does the Gemara mean? She's called Shifra because the Jewish people procreated in her lifetime. Well, they procreated in the lifetime of anyone alive in that generation. Why are we singling out her, that she's called Shifra because the Jewish people procreated in her lifetime? It was in the lifetime of anyone in that generation. So he says, well, no, not exactly, because if there is anyone whose lifetime is defined by the experience in Egypt, it would be Yocheved. Because we know she was born Bein HaChomot. She was born as the Jewish people were entering Egypt, as the 70 souls were coming down. She was born that moment, and she left Egypt. So if there's anyone that we could say their lifetime embodied the Egyptian experience, it's Yocheved. Yocheved is her life was Egypt. She was born upon entry, and she left. So therefore, the sages say the Jewish people procreated in her lifetime.
Also, she was 130 years old when she gave birth, so it was a great miracle. So you have this great birth taking place at an age which women don't give birth. It was a great miracle.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really talk about it as much. I guess because they say because Sarah already broke the age barrier by having a child at 90, so even though this is 130, but it already's been broken.
Yeah.
But certain was that maybe that's another reason why, because she was very productive at that age, and she in essence was the mother of the nation, and also because she got to get back together with her husband, where they separated from the wives because they didn't want to have children during a Holocaust or when there was such oppression of the Jewish people, and she took the advice of her daughter Miriam and got back together with her husband.
Yeah. So she's sort of the mother of procreation. She's the paragon of Pru Uravu.
Now, but isn't there different opinions who Shifra and Puah? Isn't there another opinion, Elisheva?
It's possible. I'm not familiar. I don't know.
Also, another opinion that Shifra and Puah are Egyptian. They're not even Jewish. In fact, Rabbi Kamenetsky says that any word that has the word pay and resh in it, like paro,
those were Egyptian etymology?
Shifra and Puah were Egyptian, according to some of the commentators as well.
Interesting. Yeah, so I was explaining the opinion of the Gemara in Masechta Sota. On the subject you mentioned earlier regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, he became a gadol when he went out to shoulder the burden of his people. I think a very important thought occurred to me yesterday. It's not in the book, but hopefully in upcoming works. You know, in the beginning of when we were in Morocco, we had a small Sefer Torah with us. literally, the Sefer Torah was a mezuzah. It was maybe this tall. It was tiny letters. The Baal Koreh almost had to use a magnifying glass. And we know Parshas Vayechi is what is called Parshas Sesuma, where there's no space between the end of Vayigash and the beginning of Vayechi. It's hard enough as it is to know where to start the laning. In this Sefer Torah, it was like nearly impossible.
How do you write Sefer Torah? I would like to know.
Yeah, I don't know how he did it. It was pretty remarkable. But, Rashi comments, why is Vayechi sealed? Because when Yaakov passed away and the bondage began, the eyes and the heart of the Jewish people were sealed shut. That's a well-known comment of Rashi, and I think we just gloss over it. But I think if we study it for a moment, it's going to open for us a really important understanding. What does it mean, the eyes and the heart of the Jewish people were sealed shut? The bondage started and life was miserable. Why refer to the eyes and the heart? The statement of Chazal that you referred to before, that Moshe Rabbeinu vayigdal vayetzei el echav, he went out to his brethren. Rashi comments, nasan einav v'libai, he put his eyes and his heart, lios meitzar aleim, to feel their pain. I think what Rashi is telling us is that when the bondage started and Yaakov died, you know what it means our eyes and our heart were sealed shut? We were so self-immersed and engrossed in our own pain that we couldn't look to sympathize with somebody else or to shoulder or empathize with anybody else. We were so immersed in our own trouble. When somebody has a hard time, they can't listen to someone else's sorrows. They're so caught up in their own problems, they don't have the wherewithal to empathize with anybody else. So when the bondage started, the eyes and the hearts of the Jewish people were sealed shut. They couldn't anymore empathize and sympathize with anybody else. And that's a very big problem. Because if you want God to look at your tzara and to feel your tzara, God said, if you're not looking at anybody else, if you can't look at someone else's pain and feel someone else's pain, then quid pro quo, mida keneged mida, I ain't looking at your pain or feeling your pain. So to speak, when our eyes and heart are sealed shut, we're stuck in Egypt. We have no way to get out because God is going to respond in kind. He's not going to look at our pain. He's not going to feel our pain. So we're stuck. We're stuck there. God's going to ignore us because that's how we're dealing with our friends. Somebody has to break the cycle. So comes along the savior of the Jewish people, Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says, how I'm going to break the cycle? Rashi says he put his eyes and his heart to feel the pain of the Jewish people. God says, here's the man. I've been waiting for someone like this. Because if you're going to look at someone else's pain and feel someone else's pain, I will now look down from heaven and look at the Jewish people's pain and feel their pain. And that's what the verse says. Vayar Elokim es b'nei Yisrael, Vayeda Elokim. Rashi says, God put his eyes and his heart to see and feel the pain of the Jewish people. So this midah of empathy and sympathy is not just a nice characteristic. This seems to be what made Moshe eligible to be our Redeemer and awakened in heaven that Hashem should really be attentive to our plight.
But didn't the tribe of Levi also have empathy? For example, they named the child Merari, even though they were not part of being oppressed, but they sympathized and empathized by naming Kahas, they were on edge. Merari, they were bitter because of what happened to the brothers and sisters.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that they definitely showed. They commiserated, but of all of them, it was Moshe Rabbeinu who really did something about it. Like you mentioned, he took action to.
Back the Egyptian, right?
Yeah.
Rabbi Glatstein is our guest. He's Rav of Kehilas Teferes Mordechai. His latest book is called Maggid Harakiah. It's a series on Chumash. This one is on Parsha, and we are looking at Exodus and some interesting concepts in this unique. Well, all of them are unique, but in this unique Parshas that constitute Parsha. In your book, in your Sefer, you and I always, by the way, look at at the what happened in Egypt as really so many millions of Jews, according to Chazal, according to our rabbis, died. I look at it as akin to the Holocaust. After the Exodus, it took 40 years. We got to Israel. After the Holocaust, a short period of time, we made it to Israel. I'm curious to know about your correlation. You write about the stories relating to the Holocaust, including about your grandfather. So let's look at that, and let's look at the relationship between Egypt and the Holocaust.
Okay, that's at first glance, you think, what would the Egyptian experience have to do with more contemporary difficulties? But as you mentioned, 4/5 of our people perished, and the babies were thrown into the river. So it was nothing short of a Holocaust. And I once heard an idea. I have a friend from Yeshiva, Ezra Gwertz, whose grandfather is Rabbi Berelwein. So he once shared with me a speech Rabbi Wein gave to his family, but I later saw Rabbi Wein writes this story in a number of his books. He has a new book, Heads or Tails, and I found it in his drashos in Hebrew, where he tells a story about his first, how he wondered, why of all the names that Moses is referred to, God only uses the name that Basia used. Why that name? He had nice names. Why would God use the Egyptian name like we asked before? Use Avigdor, use Tuvia. He had really nice names. And Rabbi Wein remembers his first trip to the children's memorial in Yad Vashem, which is a memorial to the 1.5 million Jewish children who were massacred in the Holocaust. And as he's going, he figures, he knows what a Holocaust memorial is. He figured there'll be exhibits, there'll be information, documents, pictures, and he was completely surprised by what he saw. You go into a room, 50 feet tall, and the room is pitch black, like the blackness, the darkness is palpable. Like makas choshach, you can't even put one foot in front of the other, and your eyes have to adjust. You can't see anything, and there's one pinpoint of light in the vast sea of darkness, and through the genius of the designer and the architect, and through mirrors, that one pinpoint of light is reflected over 1 million times, and there's a voice that plays. And the voice says, Miriam Cohen, 8 years old, Sarajevo. Sarah Friedman, 11 years old, Vilna. Yaakov Levine, 4 years old, Warsaw. Names, until you can't bear it anymore. Ray Wein said he ran out of the room and he just couldn't bear it. And after a few moments he thought to himself, hey, I didn't hear my name on the list. I grew up, I was of age, I was the same age. My grandparents left Europe, so I was born in America, but I was the same age of those kids. And my name wasn't on that list. And if my name wasn't on that list, then God saved me. God yanked me out of the Holocaust. And if He saved me, there's a reason for it. I have a purpose in my life. I have a mission in this world. God's calling out to me, hey, you weren't on the list. What are you going to do with yourself? What are you going to do for the Jewish people? And Rabbi Wein says it occurred to him that that's likely a reason why God always referred to him as Moshe. God was saying, Moshe, you were yanked out of the sea, not like the other millions of Jewish children that were drowned or eaten by the crocodile or the snake. All those other kids were murdered in the Holocaust of Egypt. But Moshe, I yanked you out. You don't want to do my mission? Moshe, don't you know I saved you? And Moshe has no choice but to say, all right, God, you got me. I'm ready. Hineni, what do you want me to do?
We have only a few moments left. You have two stories I think about relating to the Holocaust, including your grandfather. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I just used what I said about Rabbi Wein personally. My grandfather and his brother were thrown into the gas chamber. And at the very last moment, the Nazi pulled them by their hair, pulled them out, and said, "You're young, you're capable of work, get out," and saved his life. And I always think, it wasn't my grandfather only that was saved. It was my father, it was me, it was my children. God saved us. He must have wanted us. We didn't go down in the smoke like the other 6 million. And really, any Jew alive today has to think to themselves that if they're around and they have the good fortune to have a Jewish education, and they made it through 2,000 years of Jewish history, then God is saying to them, Moshe, Moshe, I saved you from the Nile. I saved you from Inquisition, from crusade, from pogrom, from Holocaust. What are you going to do for us? What are you going to do for the Jewish people? And we have no choice but to say, Hineni, all right, God, you got me. I'm ready. What do you need me to do?
As you were speaking, you remind me of Rabbi Shimon Schwab has a very interesting insight. Now, according to the rabbis who had millions of Jews die during the plague of darkness, 4/5 of the Jews died, only 1/5 left Egypt. So Rabbi Schwab asked the question, how is it possible that the Egyptians didn't notice? And how is it possible that a plague hurt the Jews more than it hurt the Egyptians? So basically he said that very few Jews died during the plague of darkness, where those that wanted to stay died. So why does the Torah say the fact that, why do we have the Chazal that say there was millions? It refers to each subsequent generations, that each one that was saved had so many doors, so many generations out of them, so it was millions extending into the future, not at that moment in time. And he gave, and there's an example that's given, I think some Rebbe had a class, huge class, it's a snowstorm, and only 4 people show up, and the Rebbe screaming and yelling as if there's a whole classroom, and the kids go, listen, Rebbe, we have only like 3 or 4 guys here, so why are you acting like we're supposed to have a full class? He goes, you think I'm only speaking to you? I'm speaking to your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. I think I love the concept where Rabbi Schwab brought out, because otherwise to say so many Jews died in Egypt, it's hard to fathom that the Egyptians did notice and the Jews were affected more by a plague than the Egyptians were. Yeah,
that's a very powerful thought, and something we always have to bear in mind.
Well, literally a few moments left. Shovavim. It starts with Shemos. A lot of people don't know what the fast of Shovavim is all about, so perhaps you can share that with us.
So just in a nutshell, Shovavim is a Kabbalistic time. It's based on the idea that you mentioned Yocheved was 130 years old. That's intimately connected with the fact that between Adam's first children and his third child, Shes, there were 130 years. During that time, Chazal say that Adam Harishon, put it this way, not for a general audience, but during those 130 years, Adam Harishon emitted certain emissions that he needed to rectify. Let's put it that way.
Did he father a whole bunch of...
The Gemara in Eruvin says that he produced demons and evil spirits, and those spiritual entities were then reincarnated in the souls of Egypt, and therefore during these weeks of the year when we're reading about Egyptian bondage and freedom, it's a time to focus on purification from this type of impurity, and therefore during these weeks, Shovavim, ending in Parshas Mishpatim, we focus on, let's say, personal sanctity, or for women to the laws of Taras HaMishpacha, of family purity.
And people fast. The only fast used to be
some people fast Monday and Thursday. Yeah.
But this is totally Kabbalistic. It's more Hasidic in origin.
It originates in the Arizal. Yes.
Right. It's more of a, like I said, it's more, the Ashkenazi communities now, it's more of a Hasidic custom that they fast Shovavim.
Yeah, it's very Kabbalistic, where there are ways of, even in let's say in Yerushalayim, in the Yeshiva Shar HaShamayim, people will go there and they'll have certain redemptions where they pay off their fasting. But again, I think the main thing is that in everything in Torah, whenever we read about something, there's an idea we're reenacting that experience, and therefore if we're reading about the bondage in Egypt, then to a certain extent, spiritually, it's as if we're there, and everything in Torah is latent with great depth. Some of it we know about, most of it we're still aspiring to understand.
Are you saying the devil's in the details?
Yeah.
And Rabbi Daniel Glatstein, the Rabbi Sefer Mordechai, his latest book is called Sefer, Maggid Harakiah. It's published by Ali Zeiss Publishers in Lakewood, New Jersey. If
anybody wants to get the Sefer, it's available at better Sfarim stores near you, or you could go on our site, rabbidg.com, and you could get it with free shipping.
Give out that information one more time.
Okay, rabbidg.com. Could you relay that?
rabbidg.com.
Okay, thank you.
Are you saying that there are inferior farm stores when you say the better farm stores near you?
Absolutely. There are superior farm stores and inferior farm stores. Any farm store that carries this Sefer obviously is one of the superior farm stores.
Up here. And Rabbi Glatstein, thank you for joining. We're looking forward to having you back, especially for your Purim Sefer that's going to be coming out soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning in to Talkline with Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.